Hey, it's Joel Peters. I watched a video from a guy by the name of Ian on YouTube. He has 65.8k subscribers. His video about alcohol withdrawal and so forth. A video on that had 100,000 views, as he said. This video was uploaded January 23rd of this year, and it hits 1 million views. And I was reading a comment, and someone said, getting hooked on alcohol and becoming hospitalized from addiction, being drunk at work for years on end, etc. is not the normal path for most people. I like the message and realism in this video, but let's not start saying this is a normal path for most people. Or for people in your early 20s, it's time to get your stuff together and be done with partying. Life does not start at 30. Many people are well into their careers with a house and family, even without going to college at 30. Let's aspire to be better. I'm making this video because I have to keep it down because my toddler and my wife are napping right now, so that adds to it. But I'm making this video because I want to talk a little bit more about just what I've personally done over the past decade. I've had a video called Filtering the Static, something about the sunk cost fallacy and ADHD and Vyvanse, and I've been working on it since 2022, since I got my official diagnosis as a full-blown adult for ADHD, and it's been a pretty good video, but this one is kind of more of a candid thing, so it's not scripted, as my videos often aren't, but I've tried to make them scripted, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about a few things that I think are kind of important. People who are set into careers by the time they're in their mid-20s, late 20s, they had a few support systems that allowed them to do that. Most people, your average citizen in Canada and the States, are either getting to work by the time they're 18, 19, maybe even sooner, or they're going to college, post-secondary, and pursuing it. So let's talk more about that and why I think it's important to kind of get this idea away that people are forced into a career path and everything. So as I brought up multiple times in my channel and on my content and stuff, I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which needs to have the label changed, but anyway, and potentially autism, don't know. I don't like certain textures and things like that. I'm bringing this up because, as I look into the camera, I'm bringing this up because I have been trying to figure out what my career is going to be for many years. I don't do live streams anymore, as you're aware of. I did that whole Twitch thing from 2011 to 2018, came back in 2020, 2022, 2021 or whatever, and tried it again for a little bit. It didn't work out. It wasn't for me. I put that sunk cost fallacy ended. I was done with it. But ultimately, I just realized that, hey, I don't want to do this, and I don't want to feel addicted and a slave to something. Twitch has its own issues, all that stuff, and you're kind of seeing what happens when people are chronically online and they're involved in their community and they make an honest mistake, but then they double down on that mistake and they don't own up to that mistake and they keep going and they quadruple down and they then end up called a roach in the World of Warcraft community. We've seen it happen when people don't take the L and they try to double down, and people don't accept that they're wrong, ego and so forth. We've seen it happen time and time and time again. I used to have a confirmation bias that if someone had a Blue Yeti microphone, they were inherently a bad person, and that would just find out. And this most recent example is so stupid, but Pirate Software had a Blue Yeti, and there you go. So I could follow that, right? I also try to say that Drake has been a bad person. I've always had a bad feeling about him for years. But again, that's neither here nor there, and I don't want to go on this tangent. I don't want to lose you folks. So what I'm trying to say here is this. I thought I would know what my career would be by the time I was 18. I really did think I knew what it would be, and I didn't. I had no idea, because I go from... I'm being careful with what I'm saying here because I don't want to put anyone under a bridge, or I don't want to affect anyone or unveil, private secrets that shouldn't be unveiled for my family and stuff, but I can say this. I was in the foster care system when I was an infant to about toddler age, I came home and I spent time with my mom and then my stepdad when he stepped into my life. But my biological father and I are estranged. He's tried to connect multiple times. He's tried to see my daughter through, like photos of her, and I just don't, he's not part of my life. There's parts of my, people in my family that are just not part of my life anymore. And I've tried to reach out to my cousins and stuff. And my one cousin just converted to Mormonism, and she just recently got married. I think out in Washington or something. We didn't end up going. It was a small little elopement ceremony or whatever. My wife and I got eloped back in 2021 and stuff. So, people who find who they love and they get married pretty quickly or whatever. We were dated for like 4 years, three years, 2018 to 2021. So yeah, you do the math on that. Apparently I can't do math based on the memes on my channel. But I want to get on with this. Sorry, I feel like there's a lot to cover. So I was in the foster care system. I dealt with my family involved in that. I have 4 other siblings. They're all older than me, so I was the youngest of 5. There's a 7-year age gap between my brother and I, so take that as you will. And I always kind of stood in place for my family. I would always kind of be the elder sibling despite being the youngest. I've got a sister who had the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck and had oxygen deprivation, and she's severely mentally delayed. And there's moments when I'm like, oh wow, I'm kind of surprised when I talk to her on the phone, but there's things. My mom is, an elder person now. My stepdad is about 10 years younger than her. And my bio dad is very close. My biological father is very close in age to my mom, like a year apart or 2 years apart. But my mom was born in the 50s. And so for her, she also was a teacher, and she was a rebellious person in her teens and early years. So for her, she had kids a little bit later in life than most people oftentimes do. And to give you context, I'm turning 32 this year, and my mom had me in her 40s or before her 40s. So I'm, in junior high, and my mom is in her 50s, and I'm just, it's wild. And my mom in college in her 60s, and I'm just looking at this, and I'm like, I look at the controversial streamer Asmongold Zach, and I look at him and stuff, and how he didn't have a lot of support systems, and he just found something that made him happy. I didn't take care of my teeth, so I ended up getting upper dentures. I also got lower partial, but it didn't fit properly because, pain, and I had to get adjusted. And so that was a waste of money. Didn't really have much insurance and all that stuff. And it's weird. My mom doesn't want to try to say that we weren't well off, or we were, poor or whatever. She doesn't want to say it, but I feel like we were very lower middle class. Never really went hungry, but intentionally. If I didn't want to eat, I didn't want to eat, but never really hungry. But I didn't have everything all the time, and I saw friends and stuff, and I saw friends who were worse off than I was, and I had friends who were higher than I was, and I never really considered that wealth disparity gap or whatever. We lived in townhouses a lot and stuff, and we were, when I was younger, we were in apartments. But what ended up happening ultimately was that a family member was separated. A family member very important to me was separated from my family, and that affected my entire family dynamic. But this happened when I was in my just 18, 19, around that time. This is where I'm trying not to get into it. And that forced me to, one, be stupid, or I chose to be stupid, but I have 2 older siblings that are consistently partying, so drugs and alcohol, or, marijuana and alcohol especially, are around me a lot. And I made some dumb decisions, but I got most of my partying out in high school. When I came to college, I just wasn't into it. I drank here and there a little bit. One, it's expensive for what it comes down to, so I didn't drink very often. I smoked for a good few years. Drives by ADHD, by the way, is when someone's listening to someone, or they're thinking, they're looking. It's crap. I have crap eye contact. So I spent a lot of my life doing different things, trying to figure out who I was and whatnot, and not having a father figure in your life for a good portion of your time when they're there, and then having someone who's not in your life later on. It really messes with you. And I'll just say this, my parents separated for a while. My mom and my stepdad separated. They got back together and everything, but there's consistently like a lot of arguing and stuff in that home. So I think that's why I escaped into video games and into streaming and stuff. It's just because it was easier, a sense of control. Because when you're younger and you have no one in your life that you're taken away as a baby to a foster home, and stuff happens to you when you're younger, and you're just, the foster system messes you and your family up, and it doesn't really do a lot of good. It messes you up mentally and psychologically. You really don't start to have a good, valid opinion, respective of who you are. And when I went into college, at this point, I had already been doing YouTube for, 2008 to 2015. Like, you do the math on that, right? It's almost a decade. And, it took 4 years to finish high school, maybe even longer, because I started high school, because I always get this wrong, so actually it's way longer than that. But I started high school in 2008, I think it was. And then I wasn't finished properly, I think, until 2013, because I took a couple extra years because I just I wasn't stupid, I just was upgrading. That's really what it was. I was just upgrading so I could get into college. And I wanted to be a doctor, I wanted to be a lawyer, Doctor Without Borders. I was an air conditioner, I had the discipline, I had all these things. So like things were there, but it's really my adult years when I just kind of went off the rails. It seemed like I had a pretty promising setup, for all things considered. But then I just got sidetracked. And all the problems with my family, my parents being separated and not having that father figure, and trying to latch on to someone who could be like a brother and a mentor and all that stuff, it really just threw me for a loop. So, by the grace of God and everything, I was able to figure things out. But also, there was a lot of Christians that had issues too and stuff. And I saw a lot of hypocrisy in people and so forth. And that kind of started to pull me away from my beliefs and my faith as well. But ultimately what happened, there's a good point to this story. Ultimately what happened was I ended up finishing up with college for the most part. Had a couple practicums at a couple different radio stations I grew up listening to and all that, and finished up. And then shortly after that, because I was jumping into relationship after relationship after relationship after relationship, and I found out with ADHD, with the dopamine and stuff, it makes sense to not have a stable, active relationship unless you really put the work in. So I'm very, very blessed and grateful and happy that I met my wife when I did. Because I was going off the rails. I would have done something really stupid on Twitch, on stream, and I would have probably canceled myself. And I could see I was getting very jaded and angry and envious and all these things that I've talked about. And I was addicted to attention from others, because I felt like it was missing from my life. Despite my mom giving me attention, I remember instances where she'd be driving a school bus and she'd be doing like safety training and stuff, and she'd be gone for a weekend, and it's on my birthday, or when she ran as a politician and all these other things. It's like my mom very much had kids too late in life and really wanted to focus on her career and all that stuff. So for me, I look at it and I'm like, I wish things would have went differently, but they didn't. And so now with my daughter E, my wife and I try to raise her in the best environment possible. But I mean, I'm a messy, disorganized person. I look at my desk, I clean it up, I clean up my office, and then it's a mess again. And so, I just get sick of it. And if you beat yourself up, you feel a level of guilt, you do all these things. And I try, I do try. And so for me, I've worked a variety of jobs. Now that I'm jumping into the root of the issue, I've worked door-to-door sales, doing newspaper trials for people. I did stuff with my parents' company when they were, doing landscaping and maintenance and stuff for people's homes, like the front lawn and like painting and stuff. Although I'd hand out flyers for that, and I've done, I think, door-to-door chocolate a little bit. I don't actually remember if I did that one, but it was my first job technically was being paid extra in Mystery, Alaska. It was shot in, I think, 1997, 1998. It's 4.5 at that time. Had a fake wedding with this girl, Danielle. She was a twin. That was pretty funny. She was like a year older than me, I think, and everything. It was funny, right? But yeah, I got in that because my mom's, one of her friends had 2 daughters that were, like preteen, teen models, and they were asked to be involved in this, and then they needed to be chaperoned and babysat and stuff. So we ended up going on. So it was really cool. I got my chance to do that, and that was a love of acting. And then I did the play Love According to John. So I mean, I had all these support systems when I was younger, but when I was on my own and was forced out to be on my own, ultimately I made some right decisions, but I also made some pretty bad decisions. I said was in relationships, and I was kind of in the hookup culture and stuff, right? Like I was looking for a stable partner. I was always looking for a girlfriend who I could eventually see, as marriage material and stuff. But not as many people really want to settle down, especially even in like mid 2010s. Like not as many people wanted to settle down and stuff. But because I was also super egotistical and a jerk and stuff, it really rubbed people the wrong way, and I just was very polarizing and stuff. And I got that from my mom, honestly, because she's very much that way. And she would call it negotiation skills, but deep down it was just being a contrarian, a dick. So, for me, I would ask people questions that I thought people because, confirmation bias, so people are like, or, cause and effect, people say, oh, thanks for asking that question. Like, sex ed, right? That would be an example of, I would ask a question because I actually want to know something, and people aren't too embarrassed because I'm just like very blunt about things. And so, I worked as a bartender for like event centers and stuff like that. Northlands Expo, did that when I worked in liquor stores, and I did samples, like gave people samples, like, at Costco, but like Superstore, I did that. Liquor stores, as I mentioned, and also samples for alcohol at different places. And then I've worked into a little bit of prop work and lighting and everything related to sound and stuff. And then I worked at a few restaurants. I've done that. I've worked in a kitchen. I've done all these manner of things. It's like, how you look at The Sims, right, as an example, and because I play video games and stuff. The Sims, you get a chance to really choose what career you want based on your skills and so forth. Or if you think of Fallout's a great example. So in Fallout, you can basically, Fallout 3 in New Vegas especially, but even the first two, but you can basically kind of, plan out your skill levels and everything like that. Fallout 4 changes up with perks and how you can grab a range of things. But the whole thing about jobs is like I've been jumping from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. I've worked at a place called iCar Wash. They're gone now and everything, I think. But it was just car detailing places at Southgate Mall in Edmonton, and I would stand there and hand out flyers to people, and then I eventually got into detailing a little bit and did that, and vacuuming and stuff. So I've done that, and it was hot. But like that was a job where I was cool, just sit on my laptop, talk to people. I could play games, do whatever I wanted, watch movies, anything, and I could sit there and all that stuff, and I did that. But at the same time, I was also kind of involved in streaming a little bit too. So my brain was like, oh, okay, well, I would like, I wanted to stream things as well. So for me, I just really never was consistent with anything. Consistency was always an issue. I was not a dumb person. I was pretty bright. Grade 7 or grade 9, I think it was grade 7. I have my English teacher says to me, hey, Joel Peter, she's like, Joel, you've got a first year university writing comprehension level and a third year university reading comprehension level. I was like, oh, that's cool. I was a smart person. But I thought I had a disability called nonverbal learning disorder or disability. And it has overlap with autism and ADHD, which it's very possible because my siblings have it. But again, I got tested and they found ADHD. And they said, even when I was like 9 and all that stuff, they still said borderline ADHD, So my parents started putting me on Ritalin when I was, in grade 3 at 9 and stuff. And it didn't go amazing. They took me off after 2 weeks. But then I tried, Dextrin, and that seemed to work and everything. And I tried all manner of just different things to try to understand myself better. And I had routines. But what ultimately happened was I was consistently late, and I thought it was too embarrassing to be late. So I thought it was better to be absent. And because I was absent, I was missing out on things. And also in elementary, I was late because I would get hyper-focused and I would watch kids shows and stuff on my way to elementary school. I only had to walk sometimes, not that far. And yeah, I was still late. I still had issues with time, and I still do. To this day, it's now 4:38 p.m. on February 2nd, or February 1st, sorry, and I have work that needs to be done by Monday, and I'll get it done, but it's just like I'm making this video, and I've been doing this for almost 20 minutes. So for me, there's that system that's not set up right. And the reason I didn't end up becoming an alcoholic, for example, even though it was around me, I saw it happen to a friend of mine. And let's just call him X. He has a letter, but let's call him X. So X is living with me. He lives at home with his parents. You know, we're neighbors. We become good friends, almost like best friends. And we're talking. And he ends up, you know, we hang out a lot and everything like that. And then he ends up moving in with me as becomes my roommate. And I start to see how bad X's alcoholism is actually getting. And I didn't realize it because it was kind of more hidden. But then he starts being more overt instead of covert, more blatant with it. And it gets so bad that he goes to a Cash Canada pawn shop with 30 of my Xbox 360, Xbox original, I think even some of my N64 games. Because this is around the time that the Xbox 360 is out, so you don't have like a PS4 or anything like that. And so it's the latest system. He goes and he pawns it off, gets $300. He doesn't give me a cent of it, of course. He's just gone to go get blacked out drunk. And, you know, X, I've talked to him later. I said, look, dude, I forgive you. And he started to get things cleaned up. Then he ended up living with my bio dad and his girlfriend, and like my bio dad's girlfriend. And that also messed him up too, because my biological father is not he's not a good person. He's a chronic pothead. And that added a lot of derision and rift in my family, but also he's just not a good person. But he's very bright. And very much, I think he's a narcissist, or he's close to a narcissist. ADHD and narcissism kind of have overlap as well, and it seems like that sometimes. But I remember reading, I got a report from, my report from when I was in foster care and stuff, and like because you can request that. My phone's at 15%, so I don't know how much I'm going to get of this, but you notice I haven't talked a lot about my mom, because she was there. She was there consistently. She was trying to help me with school, trying to help me with cadets and all these things. She'd get involved in parent-teacher, and like, yeah, it was fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But I always kind of feel embarrassed. I'm like, I don't want to be involved. Meanwhile, I'm making stupid things. I'm being impulsive, speaking out my mind, and I'm not as well-liked as I thought. You know, one of the telltale signs of someone who has ADHD is ask them how many friends they actually have. Who do they hang out with on a regular basis? And then ask them, you know, are they laughing with you or laughing at you, and are they making fun? And there was a saying I always said to people, I'm like, I felt like people who hated me actually liked me. You know, rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, as I found out later, RSD. Or when I thought they liked me, they actually didn't like me and were annoyed by me. So, and you think about for a second, right? So meanwhile, when I'm in high school, I'm doing the bulk of my drinking and partying and, you know, and stuff and smoking and whatnot. Here I am just trying to, it's usually because it's a girl that I like. I liked a lot of women. I really did. Ever since I got married, I don't like any other women. I just love my wife, and that's all I focus on. But ultimately, I'm just trying to, you know, show off, and I'm like hanging out with my friend A's place, right? Hanging out at her place. She has a younger brother, who's like, you know, a baby, and everything, and she has another younger sister. But her place is a disaster. It was what my dad would call a flop house, or like a crack house or whatever. In hindsight, I look at it. But she's also the one that played World of Warcraft, and I played on her account and stuff. And that's actually one of the first times I played WoW. But I just remember, you know, it was like, yeah, you know, I was like, I wanted to date this girl, and then she realized, you know, she wasn't into me, so she ended up like, hey, here's one of my friends and stuff like that, and we dated for a while and all that, and then she ended up actually way later having me and a kid and stuff. But, you know, I looked at my life and I'm like, there's a lot of things I did wrong. There's a lot of things I did wrong. And I was always just chasing dopamine, right? But I would always say, like, oh, why do people like me? And I remember it was on my grade 12, first year of grade 12, because I want to make this clear. It took me a couple more years just to finish up, because I went to 3 high schools. I got kicked out of my first high school because of attendance, not because of issues with attitude or anything like that. Funny enough, my art teacher, my friend T, I guess A now, I don't know. they transitioned. And it's actually my best friend Nick's sibling. They grew up as an artist and very much has ADHD, I'm pretty sure. And they would constantly butt heads with their art teacher, who again is the same art teacher as me, and I butted heads with her as well. And this is a year later. And then also one of my, their brother, which, both, anyway, him and his, I guess now ex-wife, both had one of my teachers as well when I was in high school, actually. So it's funny like how all it kind of played out. The way you take your path is very, very interesting. So for me, like I thought, all these things were gonna work. I really thought, okay, I'm gonna be a doctor without borders. I'm gonna get my doctorate. I'm gonna get my PhD. I'm gonna help people. I'm gonna go to Africa. I'm gonna do all these things. I was interested in mission trips and all that stuff. Like definitely comes from like the Christianity and so forth. But it's like still like deep down, like I want to help people. I want to, do good for the world. And I'm in Air Cadets, and then I'm starting to see with Air Cadets that like I'm getting automatic promotions because they just start giving them out. And I'm like, no, I want to work for it. Then I saw what happened to my sister, Shay, and I'm seeing she's having issues, and she was very close to becoming a warrant officer, and that's very much like a noble thing. But she aged out as a flight sergeant. So when you hit, I think is 18 or 19, you'd age out of the Air Cadets, and then you could choose if you want to go into military, go into Air Force or what have you. Most people would just finish up Air Cadets and then just kind of go on with their life. But I was an alumni in a way, and I really only made it for a few years. But like I look at it and just what happened to her and this stuff, and I just told her, no, I want to write this test, and then I just stopped caring. My mom got involved in the parent teacher or the parent board and everything. Got involved in like scholarships and stuff. And again, my mom got way more involved in things that I wasn't. I found this church with this one girl. Or this girl, when I was dating this one girl, she's a Satanist and stuff, and I basically said, I went up on stage being, a little extra, and I said, I just want this girl to find God, whatever. It's really stupid back then, but this is again high school, and I'm just saying to her, and I found this church, and it was very loving, but then I found out they're kind of love bombing and stuff too, because they're kind of manipulative people afterwards. But that also, my mom would get involved in a church, and my parents would get involved in church, and my siblings would get involved in church, and then I would feel like I want to leave that church. Like I don't want to be involved in it. So I found another one. So you might be saying, what's the point of this? It's been almost 30 minutes. Why are we getting on with? What I'm saying is that I really didn't know what my trajectory of my path would be. I wanted to be a film director, do that stuff. I want to do all these things. And then life kind of went differently for me. And then I go into college and I find out, still dating, still not putting as much as care as my other students into things, but still winging it, consistently just winging it. That should be on my gravestone. Joel Peter, he wung it, or he winged it till he died. But that's what I've been trying to stop doing. And my wife is like, you can't wing things as much anymore, So I basically, things were going okay. Things were going a bit better. And then, like I said, the streaming was a big part of my life. And then I stopped. And then eventually said I moved out to BC, did a dream of mine. Then I eventually, like I said, we got engaged, and I was working at a call center for TELUS, like a telecom here in Canada, working with them in billing and tech support and customer or client support and stuff, and then Shopify. And I worked at a Trees Organic on Granville Street, which was it's where Carly Rae Jepsen actually was working as a cafe. It's on Granville Street in Vancouver, downtown by waterfront, very now sketchy area, but was voted best cheesecake in 2014, and they carried that for a long time. Then they had different ownership and so forth and so forth and so forth. And I made friends and coworkers. I don't talk to any of them now, but back then I was, friendly with people and acquaintances. But it was costing me more to get to work than it was making, and also wasn't getting food or anything. So I was just like, driving from Lougheed, or taking a bus or SkyTrain from Lougheed Mall all the way to, I'd take a bus to Lougheed Mall, and to the West Terminal, and then I would basically take a SkyTrain there. And it was fun. It was nice going to Vancouver and being down there and working there. And the Trees Organic was cool and stuff, but I just was like, this wasn't for me. And I found a temp agency, and then they got me a job with that company with TELUS and stuff as a contractor. And I worked in a call center, and I did that for almost just over a year. And before that, though, I was working at Save On Foods in produce, and but then I, like I said, meeting my wife in 2020, I kind of made the decision, in the pandemic of like starting a computer repair business. And also she was working on her web design stuff and started my business. And my business started to pick up. Things were going well. And I'm like, I'm a business owner now. I get to fix and build computers for people, and I get to have fun with it and enjoy it. And then things started to die down. And then we moved out to South Surrey, White Rock, South Surrey area, which, if you're not aware, it's on the south end. So Vancouver's here, and you get driving south. Eventually, it's, close to the U.S. And so we moved out there. White Rock's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place, and living by the ocean and stuff. And then, when I was working at Shopify, I was asked if I wanted to basically come on board and work on this IVR audio editing, like as a freelance editor. And that, once it put in, a year of that, I was asked then, oh, hey, Joel, do you want to come work on this project with me? And I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And that was Endless Zone Zero. And I remember, editing the auditions, sending those off to the client, which is Mahoyo or Hoyoverse, sending that to them. Well, sending it to my higher up, which is my friend and my manager, and then he sent that to them. And then I also remember, like I said, then just working on it and becoming a script coordinator on that project and becoming an audio engineer and an editor and everything. And then that led to working on Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. And I got to meet Karina Bedeker, the voice of Paimon. And I got to meet Brooke Chalmers, who's, a fantastic director. And I got to work with our engineers, and I got to work with all these people. And then I found, and meanwhile I was also on Twitch. I was still doing production and still making people sweepers, and I was still doing these things that I love for free. And I was like, cool, now I get to get paid for what I do. And now I've just made, one of my friends and a client, just a voiceover demo, an animation demo. It's like awesome. Like, I'm getting paid for this stuff, and I got to work on an audio drama, and I've got to work on audiobooks, and I've got to do all these things that I've done on my own. But these things didn't start happening until I moved out of my parents' place, away from all the chaos, away from all the disorientation and all the insanity. You're dealing with my siblings and all that, dealing with the foster care system backlash and all of that. Moving out here, getting laid off from Shopify, having my daughter born, being married, remaining faithful to my wife consistently, always keeping that marriage was the goal, and now just striving to have a stronger marriage. Because I want to be clear, when I was in relationships, when I started to feel like they were starting to go south or whatever, my brain would just, the dopamine is lost, and now I'm like, oh, well, now I'm not really feeling the same thing. I had one girlfriend that I dated for 8 months, which was my longest relationship at that point. I want to be clear, like, this was like straight up relationship. She was going to University of Alberta, taking lean molecular genetics, wanted to be a geneticist, study her own, there's some things she wanted a reason on it. And I was in love with her. And in high school, there's another girl that I was in love with. There's more infatuation when I think about it, but it felt like love back then. But with this one woman, I was in love with her. And I thought, because we're both Christians, we're both left-handed, it's meant to be, right? My own romanticized view of things, it's meant to be. It wasn't. And she found out she wasn't into me in that way. Despite us being together for 8 months, she wasn't into me in the same way. And she was focused on her studies ultimately, but she found out that she was either pansexual or bisexual, leaning more towards women. Although my parents and somewhat me suspected that maybe something happened when she went, because she was here and then she went back to her province of Saskatchewan, where she was initially from. And I suspect something happened. She went to a party, and because she changed, and it felt like something changed with her. The shift, the vibes, everything just shifted. And I feel like I begged to remain, but it's sad. I was upset. And it took a long time for me to get over that. And meanwhile, shortly after that, then I met another wonderful woman who was great. She's really, really kind, but didn't have the same belief systems as I did completely. and everything, but she loved me and I loved her, but it wasn't on the same way as I love my wife. When I talk about Crystal, when I think about Crystal, I love my wife. I mean, yeah, people get irritated with each other and they get annoyed. Maybe not irritated, but they get annoyed. People say stupid stuff and everything. But at the end of the day, we love each other. Just like my mom and my stepdad love each other. They've been married since 2000. They're for each other. If there's anyone, even though despite their arguing and stuff, they're still for each other. And I realized that chaos that I left behind, the only time when I talk to my parents candidly, or I'm saying this candidly, when I talk to my parents, especially my dad, and he starts talking about problems with my family or my sister, whatever, I just get exhausted from it. And this is where I'm trying to also keep it quiet too. So, because there's things you just don't share online with other people and strangers. But when my mom went to Uganda for business and see some friends out there, she's gone for a couple months. My dad, so when I refer to my dad, I'm referring to my stepdad. He was going crazy. He's going crazy. He's going off the rails. And eventually we got him to a hospital to make sure he was okay. Because he was delusional. He was worried about her. Because it's not, Uganda it's a third world nation and there's some stuff that happens out there. My mom's a very prolific Christian. She's very much on her beliefs and there's a lot of issues out there. It's not as bad as some other places in the world, but it still can be bad. And there is bandits. There is potential of trafficking and things like that. So my dad's, for all sincerity, he's completely worried and that's valid. But, basically I was trying to be a mediator and making sure they were talking to each other, and he wasn't even believing that she was real for a while there. It got bad. It got really bad. And that was hard on me. And my wife was getting really tired of it. And when my mom got home and she lost, and her phone was dead and their service was down, they were having issues and stuff. When I couldn't get a hold of her, the worst came to worst of that they got into an accident or something bad happened or whatever. They were fine. But I did what I did. What the eldest is supposed to do is I went and I was trying to track down if someone could go to their house. It was winter. It's -50 out. It's bad, right? I have access to my mom's emails and stuff because I don't want her to get phished and all that stuff, and scammed. So I'm looking at this. I'm looking at her Google history. I'm not seeing anything. So the account, the map history and stuff, and I'm not seeing anything. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And it's been a few hours. It's like my mom lost connection and signal when she was in Uganda for in November, right after the president got elected, actually, or sorry, when the president got the vote happened, right after that, my mom. So all of November, on mid-December, I'm dealing with my dad's paranoia and delusions and insanity. His PTSD, because he was in the military for a good while there and everything. And he's a veteran and stuff, and he suffers from it. And I look at the text message, because he types very cryptically. But what I'm saying is, I got his sister involved, right? I could have, and that built our relationship, but it was also really exhausting and emotionally just draining. So there's a lot, right? Life doesn't always give you what you're looking for. And when ZZZ came to an end for us, and we work on other stuff, there's slow periods with freelance, because that's the nature of it. I needed a job, so I started looking for work, and I found a job at Save on Foods. Again, I worked in the kitchen, in the restaurant there, making beef brisket and stuff. I did that for a month, 3.5 weeks really, and I quit. And I quit because I was making more with my computer repair company, with my freelance audio design and engineering, with my wife's, our agency that we started a couple of years ago. I was making more from that. It's just not always consistent. So here I am looking again for another full-time job or a part-time job that pays better. Because on the pay range on the website for Save On Foods. It said $17.40 or $17.50, which is minimum wage here, up to 21. I'm like, you know what, 21, I can work with that if it's, I'm getting 20, 30 hours a week. Okay, that's not terrible. I live in, like I said, South Surrey, White Rock. It's an expensive place here. Vancouver is super expensive. It's not cheap to live here, right? So it kind of all works out. And I got paid minimum wage, and it's unionized, so there was union dues. So I'm making $15 or less an hour after, or net effect, or gross. So less, and I'm only working 4 or 5 hour days, and I'm working 5 days a week, maybe 6, or I'm working like an 8 hour. Anyway, I burnt my arm in an oven. I got singed by trying to clean the rotisserie oven for the chicken, and I burnt myself, and my coworker was just being right in my face. I was not feeling well. I was wearing like PPE. I'm like wearing like a mask to clean with heavy chemicals and stuff. And he's not even my manager. He's not even a supervisor. He was just a guy who know-it-all. And I became friends with one of the assistant managers in the store, and I told him, look, I'm not feeling well. I'm not feeling good, and I burnt myself. And he said, do you want to go home? I said, yeah. And he's like, all right. And he talked to the guy, and he got to talking to. And I don't know. And then after I left that place, this was basically in perfect timing too. I left, and we went to PAX to go to Seattle for the first time, which is great. My wife had fun. My daughter had a blast. We stayed in a hotel. It was really, really nice, actually. And we were there for the weekend basically, and then we came back. We were there for a couple days. Yeah, we were there for a couple days, and then we came back, and it was really, really nice. Like, it was really cool to go to PAX and then get lunch and everything and head back. But these things, they all kind of work to happen for a reason in a way. But yeah, ultimately I realized that I don't want my daughter and potentially next daughter or son to be raised in a home where it's chaotic. And there's nothing wrong with messy, and rooms being disorganized. I mean, you obviously want to try to fix it up, but dirty and disgusting, no, you don't want that. You don't want grimy. You don't want any of that. And you don't want the toxicity. You don't want anything toxic. We don't yell, Crystal and I. We don't yell at each other. We solve arguments. I get frustrated, for sure, and she does, as I mentioned, but we don't yell at each other, and I try not to. But I also know with my own, on my brain is, I also know that I'm not, I can get snippy, or I can snap, and I can get very testy, or very, snippy is the best way to put it. And I can get irritated at times, and I don't mean to be. I really don't. So yeah, this has been a 40 and a half minute, video, just saying that, people don't always have the best shot at life, and some people are given a silver spoon. I hate that it's derogatory. They are given one, or they're given like a full ride scholarship, but also look at the struggles that they have. Despite all the issues, despite being left-handed in a right-handed world and having this debuff, and the way my brain is with a debuff, having these other cool things come up with ideas and hyper-focusing, but being able to have like offset, despite all of that, and being pretty skilled at things and learning things quickly and picking stuff up, and being great at talking to people, going to, commerce, like Chamber of Commerce mixers, and meeting the mayor of White Rock, and, well, not meeting her, having her next to me, not realizing that she was, and saying hi, but, having a proper introduction, but meeting other people, important people, and working, Cutco and Vector, and doing all these things, and being able to go out there and just do stuff, take the initiative on it. And people have their struggles, and everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, and you got to find people that will help you for that. But for me, ultimately, being able to just have that ability to do so has offset any other potential wrongdoing I had in my life, of not being set up with the best cards, being dealt the wrong hand initially. I was a happy baby when I was younger, so my mom says. But I didn't cry much. But then I found out, it wasn't as sunny or peachy as I thought it was. And then you look at remembering old film footage and seeing that the house was not in the best state of arrears, or it was in disrepair and stuff. And there's like, just stuff, clutter. But seeing that this has been going for years, and there was a hoarding issue in my family, even with my grandma and stuff. Like, you see that, and you're like, okay, it makes sense, you know. So me leaving, it really did change my life and made me become a better person ultimately. But I still had so much baggage that followed. And you can't escape it. You can't move to a new city and just escape it. You have to deal with your problems eventually. That's ultimately what I wanted to say. You know, if you've been alive for 32 years and you don't have a career sorted, don't feel like you have to work a career for 50 years, then retire or whatever. That's not the way we work anymore. People pick up gigs. As long as you're able to pay your bills, make ends meet, take care of your family, take care of yourself, and have fun in life, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. Don't feel like you need to get, you know, a car, all that stuff, or the newest stuff. Don't feel like you have to be stuck in a fish tank and have, you know, basically as your lifestyle increases, like your wage increases, your lifestyle spending increases. You know, don't feel like you have to do that. But also be modest with your spending, invest, save for your future. And you know, I'll tell you that I end on this. My friend B, who is he's a counselor, he's a good friend of mine. His birthday is a day and a year after mine, so I'll give you an idea. We met because we both are neurodivergent. You know, he suspects he has autism, and his son has it. And he works with neurodivergent people, and he's very, very good at what he does. Very, very skilled. A lot of our conversations are through WhatsApp, but we have face-to-face and everything like that. We went out for lunch recently. It was his treat. I got him a book on chess, which he really appreciated. It was like it was going to be a coffee table book, and he had a plan for some desserts, but he got sick, so he ended up just taking me out for lunch, which was really nice. We had steak. And in his case, I just talk. I do voice notes, and I send him stuff, and I send long text messages. And I get a vent. And I got to do stuff. You know, he doesn't mind it. He doesn't mind it. I listen to him too. Like, I do listen to him. I provide feedback and advice and guidance and stuff too, because that's what friends do. But he gave me a tip about investing in XRP. He had 100,000 coins worth of XRP, and he sold all of them because he just needed the money. And he bought them when they're super cheap. And he told me that tip, and I've made like $100 from it. And we were talking recently, and he's like, oh man, that was the one that got away, because he had Bitcoin when he had like 100 Bitcoins at one point, or 1,000 or something. He had a lot of Bitcoins for that small amount, but he was like, you know, gave them away for pizza and stuff. They weren't worth much then. He regrets that. And XRP is the next one. And he's like, you know, I could either work a 9 to 5 just to survive, or I could sell my crypto. Because he's married, he has 2 kids, he lives at home, in the sense of it's his mom's place, but they're in the basement. And that's how, you know, it goes out here, right? And so, in B's case, he is doing pretty well, but he has his issue. He has absolutely his issues, and I would say he's more successful than I am. And then he would look at someone else who's even more successful, right? You are only as successful as you make yourself, and you're only as successful as you've reached, if that makes sense. Like, what I'm saying is, like, if you have a goal of success, let's say you want to get, with a YouTube channel, you want to hit 1 million subscribers, and you've hit 1 million subscribers, if you're making your bills paid and your ends met and you have all needs met, you're successful in that sense. If you're satisfied in your life and you content in what you have, you're successful. It doesn't matter if you don't have all, you know, Rolex or Philippe Petit or any of that stuff, right? You don't have nice watches, or you don't have a nice car or a nice house. The house is not a luxury, it's a necessity. But as long as you have enough stuff to put in that house where it's not overwhelming, or you have more kids or whatever, that's why you need more stuff, right? That's why you need a bigger place. But as long as you're not overspending, overmaxing yourself, and you have your needs met, you don't have to worry about your finances, you're successful. But most people aren't successful in that sense, because we're all making our ends meet. And again, what we learned from the US and the medical system and the insurance system is that every person, 99% of people, maybe it's a little bit lower than that, but 99, let's say, percent of people working paycheck to paycheck are 1 paycheck away from being homeless. 1. And so we look at these people who look down upon the unfortunate and the downtrodden and all that. And if they didn't have all their stuff, they didn't have their money and their things set up, if they lost it all one day, they would be in that same boat. And this is how good things have gotten for me as well, to go kind of away from the gloom and doom. I have a client of mine who invested a lot of money and time and everything. Him and his wife spent a lot of money and time into a very successful garden business. They sold their business a few years back, almost a decade ago. And when I went up to their house, I was blown away because this was like a colonial, really nice area. It was a really nice place. And all they wanted me to do was take their existing iMac and set up their new Mac Mini, their M4 Mac Mini. And that was it. And basically swap the data from the iMac, the 2017 iMac, to the Mac Mini. And I did. Sat there, I got paid for my time. They really appreciated it. I got set up with their emails and everything. Then I hear a message, a couple weeks later, or basically a month later. It's like, hey, Joel, I decided I actually want to go with the iMac. Which do you recommend? And I was like, are you sure? The screen. They're like, yep, I'm willing to drop from a 4K 27-inch display to a 4.5K 24-inch display on the iMac. Get an M4, same thing. They ordered it. It's coming in February. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's go ahead and everything, get it wiped, all that stuff. Then I go back online. Afterwards, they're having an issue accessing their email, so I connect to their computer. We do that, and they ask me, oh, how much are you? And I'm like, oh, no charge. Like, this is something that I've done. They're like, no, I insist. And I'm like, oh, okay. I said, no, don't worry. And then like, well, I'll just pay you, because I have to go back in February and get their iMac set up and everything, because I moved all their data to an SSD, and now it's going to for backup, and then we're going to restore to it. Anyway. They live in this beautiful house, beautiful architecture, beautiful furniture, everything, right? And I was going to sell the iMac on behalf of him, and instead he's like wanted it back after I wasn't able to sell it. So people offered like $400, $450. It was 2017. It was full, pretty decked out and stuff. And he said, no, I'm going to use it for my son for X-Plane 12, something he was interested in before, and other things like that. And so I bring it back, as I mentioned, and get it set up again for him so he could use it in the meantime. And then he returns the Mac Mini, right? This is a person who's very likely going to be a lifelong client because he's so happy with my service. He's so happy with, even though I made a mistake with his emails because I was going off the information he gave me and I owned up my mistake, instead of doubling down on saying, no, I didn't. Instead of, pulling a roach or a pirate, I decided to say, no, I made a mistake and I don't want you to pay for this. But, it's an hour of my time, but he has no problem. And I'm not charging like an arm and a leg, but I'm charging a pretty fair price. No problem, right? I had a client of mine went over to her place to fix her MacBook Pro, 2015 MacBook Pro, I think, and I updated it, whatever, or maybe 2019, I don't know, something like that. And she told me, she's like, what's your pricing at right now? And I said, oh, it's this. And she's like, increase it. You're too low. Because I thought, the amount was nothing to scoff at, right? I'm like, oh, this is nothing, right? I've increased my price, and I've never had a rejection on it from someone who's interested. I've had people who paid. I ran a sale around Christmas time because no GST basically, and I lowered the price by like $10 or 15. But I'm like, anyway, and that was helped out too. But I had a client who drove up from Vancouver, South Vancouver, with their partner, so I could take a look at their laptop. My wife set all this up for me through her web design skills. My career in radio, which came to an end, which might pick up, I don't know, depending again, because I live in the middle of nowhere, so that's part of the reason why I was holding off on getting another full part-time job. But because of that, I was able to work on Zenless Zone Zero and Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail and all these other projects and everything. Because of my background in acting and theater, I was able to get voice lines in that game and look into coaching. Because of my background in music, I was able to compose my own jingle. I mean, that's my own thing. But I was also able to meet people. And a guy who worked on Netflix projects and stuff says my sound design skills are great. And people are constantly telling me I'm good at these things. And someone trusted me to make them a voiceover demo, like an animation demo. So like, don't ever discredit your own previous experience on things. And because I have the skills with door-to-door sales and background and all these, and Cutco and vector marketing and bartending, all these things of building rapport and working in promotions, all these different things, I can now go to a mixer, a Chamber of Commerce mixer, meet people, and potentially get my wife and I a new client for a website when they exactly need one, and another person, and another person. And so like all these skills that you learn accumulate into a career. And whether or not you have that typical office 9-to-5 career, that's gone. My manager and good friend that I've worked on with the Mahoyo stuff and all these other projects, he told me, he's like, Joel, back, because he's, 10 or so years older than me. He's like, but when I was younger, it was definitely that mindset of you get a career. I just around my mic here. You get a career, and you stick with one thing, right? Maybe you do two things in your life, but you typically do one thing. People who have a midlife crisis would switch careers, or they do something, buy an expensive vehicle, whatever. They've worked hard for it. We're in an era now. By the way, owning a house, he has his own place with his wife, and he pays a lot of property tax on it. It's not even a super, super big property. But he's out, in Atlanta and stuff, or in that Atlanta area of Georgia. And he's telling me, like, even him, like, even in a secluded area, like, he pays a lot in property tax and, like, home. I don't think he has a mortgage anymore. He's paying that. And it's, like, a lot. My parents were finally able to get a house of their own. And it's a mobile home. And it was a nice mobile home from the 70s, but that costed them a lot. And they didn't realize that their mortgage was increasing. So you have people who are even well off, who have things established. You don't know what people are going through until they tell you, or you could read their mind, but you can't. So you don't really know. And so ultimately, if you're not willing to empathize with people or understand their shoes, there's people who are stockbrokers, real estate agents, politicians, a bunch of different things, and doctors who are homeless in the streets of Vancouver. People who were well off, they made some bad decisions. LA, New York, Vancouver. Musicians, we see it consistently. So that's why I'm making this video, because that one comment really started bothering me about how you have to be on track by your 30s. It's like, no. You should have your footing of who you are and understand who you are. But there's a saying that people with ADHD are oftentimes not starting life until, like, their brains aren't developing until basically their 30s. It's not all for everyone, of course, but my phone just hit 5%. We're almost an hour in, and this was the long one. It really was. And I can say that my bills are paid. We're able to get takeout and delivery when we need to. I'm able to have a nice computer. Yeah, it's a stretch, but I'm able to make it work. My wife has a computer, a newer Mac Mini, an M2 Mac Mini that was fully spec'd out. We're able to have monitors and get things. I'm resourceful, she's resourceful, and yeah, we have a mess in our house, but we also have a daughter, and our daughter likes to throw stuff around and everything, and my wife just took her to a new naturopath, and that's expensive, and like, we have insurance, we have a car, we're able to get things working, so we're doing okay. My wife is pulling a lot of the weight with that, but we share our finances together. And yeah, moving to a new province might be a little bit cheaper, but ultimately you still have to uproot yourself and rebuild everything. So don't ever discredit what you've learned. Don't ever discredit what you've learned, who you've worked with, anything, because it's going to bite you in the butt if you do. And you can pivot it into what's going to help ultimately make you money. Because gone are the days, like I said, of long-term careers. Careers now, sorry, I know what I was going to say. So what he told me is like, Joel, careers aren't really a thing anymore. Because I was looking at game design and some other things where the dopamine takes me, what feel like I'd be good at. And ultimately, you have to kind of assess your skills and figure out what you're good at. But, just recently I was watching Suits, and I'm like, I want to be a lawyer. Maybe it's not accurate or relevant or could happen, but keep in mind, you just have to think about, be realistic with your goals and who you are too. But yeah, that's kind of what I want to say with rambling and tangents aside. I'm excited to see where life takes me in the next 30 years, because I'll be in my 60s at that point, and I'll see my daughter grow up, potentially walk down the aisle, maybe even graduate from college and stuff, because we want her to be set up. And that's the mindset I changed in becoming a dad and getting my life on track. So there you go. That's 32 years of life experience.